The founding ideas of the U.S. has heavily contributed to the most individualistic society on earth. The American Constitution and Bill of Rights were centered around individualism. The greatest influence on this came from the ideas of the European Age of Enlightenment, also called the Age of Reason. Various times are given for this, but certainly it would include the late 1600s, all the 1700s, and some have it beyond that. My intention is to go through the various thinkers of this Enlightenment time frame and show how they created a stronger philosophy based on the individual. This is from a fear of being unable to protect the individual self. The European government, before the Age of Enlightenment, had been almost entirely totalitarian, with few and sometimes no rights for the individual. The core of individualism is the belief that the individual is responsible for all in their life. Poverty, or extreme poverty, then, is seen as the fault of the individual in a strongly individualistic philosophy. They didn't work hard enough. The core of the philosophy states, whatever happens to you in life is because of your choices and not the responsibility of society. Many of our movies embrace this, with the heroes facing tremendous odds against surviving or succeeding. The idea is, if you are unable to survive, then maybe you shouldn't. This is the philosophy that I was mostly around growing up. Pure individualism would not offer law, insurance, social security, welfare, public education, unemployment, taxes, religion, or even public roads. Our American society has a significant influence of individualism, but it is not pure individualism. Pure individualism is every person is out for themselves, without concern for others. Collectivism is a culture that is about the common good or community, the opposite of individualism. Words like generous, helpful, self-sacrificing, dependable, hospitable, caring, humanitarian are words associated with collectivism. Words associated with individualism are self-centered, selfish, independent, callous, and inconsiderate. I'm not using those words in a negative sense, but rather as a description of what individualism is. This is the perspective a society has in being individualistic versus one of collectivism. In 1980, Dutch psychiatrist Geert Hofstede created the cultural dimension scale. One element of it was individualism versus collectivism. This has become the standard model for individualism versus collectivism for those studying this. The two highest rated individualism countries are the US and the UK. Most of Europe and countries whose populations were made up of mostly European settlers were found to be more individualistic. The countries of Israel, Spain, Argentina, India, and Japan were found to be about a 50-50 mix of individualism versus collectivism. Two exceptions in Europe to this are Greece and Portugal, which were found to be more communal or collective. The rest of the world was found to be much more collective than individualistic. I've read that over the last few decades, the world has been moving towards individualism. I suspect this is from a world that has been more strongly influenced by the West. This may change as the Asian countries become stronger and stronger. The Age of Enlightenment, which greatly influenced the American Revolution and Constitution, was a reaction to being controlled by corrupt, totalitarian governments. The individual had no control of their life. It is the freeing of this control that was desired. The following is a list of those who heavily contributed to the Age of Enlightenment. They were all well-known writers and philosophers: Locke, Montesquieu, Hobbes, Rousseau, Blackstone, Voltaire, and Beccaria. All had great influences on the founding fathers of the U.S., its Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Many believe Locke had the greatest influence. John Locke of England wrote Treatise of Government, which was published in 1690. There he identified legitimate government. This is when a ruler gains authority through the approval of their citizens. Government's responsibility then is to protect the natural rights, that is, those given by God, also known as inalienable rights. Locke and other writers of the time believed these to include freedom of religion, property, and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The idea was that if government did not protect these rights, its citizens should overthrow that government. Locke is given credit for the concept of separation of church and state. French Charles Montesquieu published The Spirit of Laws in 1748. He suggested a balance of powers between the executive, judicial, and legislative. This is the idea the American political structure is based on. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, from the Swiss city-state of Geneva, published Social Contract in 1762. He suggested the social contract should be between people and its government. This is we the people, as in we the people of the United States, comes from. He writes of the ethics of governing. He calls for two political portions of society. One is the legislative, which all members of society, including women, which was a new concept, at least in Europe at the time, all members would decide the laws. Government then would enforce the laws, and if this wasn't done as the people wished, the government would be abolished, and a new government would be formed. English judge William Blackstone wrote Commentaries on the Laws of England, published 1760 to 1765. His works are even today reviewed in various U.S. Supreme Court decisions. This is said to be the most influential work on American law. Thomas Hobbes of England concluded in his famous book Leviathan, published in 1651, that man is very violent, and for safety agrees to a social contract. This social contract exchanges absolute freedom for safety. The social contract gives life, liberty, and property. The French Voltaire was an advocate of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to a fair trial, and separation of church and state. Italian Cesare Beccaria wrote on Crimes and Punishments, published in 1764. Beccaria is considered the father of modern law and the father of criminal justice. He wrote against torturing to obtain confessions, which was common at the time, wrote against the power which allowed judges to sentence as they wanted, wrote against the random use of the death penalty, and was against revenge. He wrote of the importance of fair trials and humanitarian treatment of prisoners. He felt it critical to have more clarity and consistency in law. There were numerous other ideas and contributions from the Age of Enlightenment. Frenchman Denis Diderot was the inventor and writer of the concept of the encyclopedia. The first encyclopedia was published in the mid-1700s in 28 volumes. Denis was the key editor. He wanted it to contain all the world's knowledge. Scottish economist Adam Smith is considered the father of economics and the father of capitalism. In Wealth of Nations, which was published in 1776, he looks at the division of labor, free market, and how countries become wealthy. In the division of labor, he looked at specialization of labor as being important. Production of products were seen to be more efficient if labor was specialized. He felt the government should not interfere in the market. This has had a great influence on the development of the U.S. economy and commerce law. It today still allows for a tremendous power of corporations in U.S. law and society. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, as that is how YouTube decides to send it to others. Have a great day, and see you in the next episode.